Hi there, scientists. Today, for our last day of science this week, you are going to need your box of crayons, science notebook, pencil, scissors, glue stick, and your yellow resource folder that's inside of your anchor binder. Remember, don't take out your yellow folder, just have it opened. When you are opening your yellow folder, you are only going to take out one page for today's lesson. The page is going to say a scientist can and has 3 boxes. Then close your yellow folder inside of your anchor binder and you may put it in your basket. We're going to then go ahead and open up our science notebook to see our last lesson, which was on Tuesday when we set up our notebook structure and had our science foldable. So just reviewing the structure of our science notebooks will be the left side is going to be the structured side, or the side that Mrs. Ling is going to provide the teaching or the information we need to learn. And then the right page is going to be the page that we are able to be a little bit more creative with. So we're going to turn the page to look at page 7. And we're going to write page 8 because we always take care of a left side and a right side in science during the lesson. Turn back to the table of contents. And we're going to go ahead and write page 7 and then page 8. So this one we do write for each page in our table of contents because it's slightly different titles. So for page 7, we're going to write a scientist dot, dot, dot. We are going to be labeling some information in those foldable pages. The date is 8-27-20. And the second item that we're going to use for our right side is we're going to be creating my scientist. So we'll talk about what that means when we're there. And it's once again the same date because we always take care of a left page and a right page. So then we turn back to where page 7 is going to be. And at the top of the page, we're going to write today's title. So we said this title is a scientist. And then we had 3 dots because that means that we're going to continue those statements. The next thing we're going to do before we glue this down is we're going to create our foldable. So for this particular one, we're going to make 3 flaps or 3 doors we're going to use. So using a pair of scissors, you're going to turn your foldable to the side, and only very carefully you're going to cut on that bold black line, stopping before you get to this white section that's going to be used as the margin. If you cut too much, you are going to then separate it from the original, and you don't want to do that. So then you do this one more time between the second 2, stopping before you get to the white section. So I've only made 2 cuts, and I did not cut all the way through, so I have 3 doors or 3 flaps. When you turn this over, pay close attention. I am not putting glue on my doors. Only the back side of that white strip of margin of that piece of paper is the only section I'm going to put glue. So using your glue stick, be very careful that you do not put too much glue on. So you just put it in that white section that goes from the top to the bottom. Once you're done with the glue stick, then you can turn it over, try to line it up to that red margin that's on your notebook paper, and just push down that section that had glue stick. Make sure that you've double checked that the doors open for each of those flaps. I always like to go ahead and pre-fold my doors open and then put them back down, just so it's a little easier when we start recording our information. So you can take a moment to do that. Remember, at any time you can pause your video and then restart it when you're ready. So in science this year, we're going to be acting as a scientist. So we need to know, what does that mean? What is a scientist? So the first bit of information we're going to look at is, well, what can they do? So we're going to open up our top flap that says a scientist can, and we're going to list some of the traits that a scientist can have. So there's someone who can think, they can make mistakes, They are someone who asks questions. They're someone who writes or records their findings. They sort through data or information. They conduct experiments. We're going to make a second column that we can say they also build and create new things. They make observations, so they observe. They count to include in their data information or numbers, and they do a lot of measuring, so we put measure. So there are other attributes, but these are some of the most important that we feel that a scientist can do. So make sure that you've recorded all of our answers, and then when you're done, you can go on to the next door. The next door says a scientist has. So we need to know, well, what are some of the things that make a scientist be able to perform their job? So we open up the second flap and we say, well, a scientist has to have some special tools. They might have to have a lab room. It's important that scientists have a lab coat or the proper clothes to wear so they do not get some of their experiment on them, they don't bring it home, they're not exposing outside influence. They also have tests, so things that they create to be able to find out results. They might use hand lenses. They might have goggles to protect their eyes. They might use a scale to do the measuring. They create mixtures. They oftentimes will work with chemicals. But most important, scientists have fun because it's something that they enjoy to do. They are doing something that they're passionate about finding the results of. So we definitely want to make sure that we remember that as we are conducting our experiments and our lessons that we're having fun, and that's why we include that right creative side. When you're ready, close that door and move on to the last and final door. The last door says a scientist is. Well, let's think about some of those characteristics that make someone good at being a scientist. So a scientist is someone who we would consider to be pretty smart. We could say that a scientist really could be anybody. They also are someone who we would consider to be hardworking because we don't want someone who would give up if the results aren't the way that they intended them to be or they didn't find the information they were looking for. I would consider a scientist to be pretty darn awesome. But most importantly, a scientist is you. You are all my little scientists this year. So we want to make sure that we realize that you have all of the attributes that we just mentioned. When you're ready, you can close that third and final flap. So because we just went over some of the things that are really important to what a scientist is, what they can do, what they have, we're now going to look at the right side. This side is my favorite side. So at the top, we're going to write the lesson title. So this side, we're creating My Scientist. So for this particular assignment, you are going to be asked to draw what you would look like as a scientist, and then write around it some of the attributes that we would have as what you are going to do as a scientist. So I might draw myself in a quick picture. Remember, this is not art class, so it does not have to be a beautiful picture. Just try to do your best, and then we're going to add some color in a minute. So we might say, okay, well, there's Mrs. Ling. There's Mrs. Ling's nose, her eyes. And I can fill in with color in just a minute. We can say there is Mrs. Ling's mouth, smiling. I'm going to add hair later, so just know that it's not hairless. Then I'm going to draw maybe myself in what I would be wearing as a scientist in our science labs. And right now, because you're at home, we aren't going to be able to give out, but when we get back to the classroom, we're going to have our science lab coats. So that's something pretty cool that we'll have this year. So our lab coats, and I'm going to just kind of keep going. Drawing to the best of your ability. So we're going to have our lab coats kind of show that it's going all the way down because they're pretty darn long. And then you can wear like your pants or your shorts or whatever it might be. You might have like a t-shirt on underneath it, or something with buttons. You can do that. The lab coat sleeves are usually long sleeves, and then you can draw your hands and your hand, and then you can draw some shoes on it. On your lab coats, you can say that there's pockets. And then you can draw some of the colors. So this is the parts that's the creative side. So Mrs. Ling has dark brown hair, so I'm going to put some brown in first. And this is, of course, when you are doing what you would look like. So not a picture of Mrs. Ling. So I'm going to put some brown in my hair. And then I'm going to put a little bit darker brown on top because my hair is pretty darn dark. Let's see if I can find the right color. Well, I'm going to add a little bit of black on top because it has dark. My brown is not as dark as what my hair is, so I'm going to just add a little bit more dark to it. You can add your favorite color to your t-shirt. Mrs. Ling loves purple and green, so I already used purple, so I'm going to use green. And then maybe I'm wearing some blue pants, so I'm going to get my blue out. Remember, this is just a quick picture. You're not doing your absolute most artistic drawing right now. It's just a quick picture of you in a lab coat. And then maybe you want to draw or color in some shoes. So I'm going to give myself some black shoes. Once you're done, you might want to then write your words in color. You can write your words in a pencil. I'm going to use my pen just so you can see a little bit better, but this is when you can use more color, so you can definitely do that. So we're going to write the words that were in our left side in the A Scientist Can. So I'm going to write those around my picture. So I'm going to write the word, well, a scientist can think. So I'm going to put the word think by my brain. Then I'm going to write the word experiment. And we're just adding these around. This is someone who can draw, so I'm just adding that one in because that's what we're doing right now. We can say that they can predict, so you can write exactly what's on that list, or you can write the ones that Mrs. Ling's writing. You can say, well, scientists can have fun. We can write and record our data. We can measure. We can also put ask questions. So you can write the exact list that we had, or you can be a little bit different and add the ones that Mrs. Ling has. So today for science, we talked about briefly what a scientist can, what they have, and what a scientist is. And then you were able to create what your scientist looks like and the important attributes that your scientist has for this year.